Hey, what's going on YouTube? Alabama Reloader here. So coming to you today, and I wanted to go over the velocity results that I got testing out the Hornady 130 grain CX bullet. Now these are the pulled bullets that I purchased from AmericanReloading.com a little while back. I posted about it. I think I did a video on it as well. But they were selling them in 250 count packs. They were deeply discounted, and so I just decided to take a chance on them, pick some up, and load them in the 6.5 Creedmoor. Now, I was pleasantly surprised when I got them in. I thought there might be a lot of pull marks on them, things of that nature, but there really wasn't. The only thing that you could really see on the bullet that you could tell it was pulled was where it had been seated into the case previously and then taken out. It just had a little bit of marking on the bullet from where you could tell it had been seated into the brass. So outside of that, there weren't any visible pull marks on the bullets or anything like that. So I'm really hoping these shoot well and perform well in my 6.5 Creedmoor, because I plan on hunting with them this year. So here are the powders that I tested, and I based this off of the Hornady load data, and I've got the velocity results on a different sheet of paper. The table, just trying to get the thing to format properly and then print it from my phone, and it was a disaster. So we're gonna have to kind of walk through that slowly because it's a bit of a mess. But this is from Hornady's website. If you go to their website and you're looking for load data for the CX bullets, it's not in their printed manual. I'm sure it's in their app. I did not renew my subscription to their app. You have to pay for it for the reloading data. I didn't renew it. I only had it for a year because I bought their manual and it came with a free year of their app. I'm sure they updated that information there, so you can find it there. Or if you go to their website for their CX bullets, you can find some of the load data there. They've got it for the 6.5 Creedmoor, the 130 grain CX. And I basically followed their recommended overall length. I loaded everything, all 50 rounds, loaded them to 2.810, and the 5 powders I chose, I just kind of took a little bit of I guess I wanted to take a little bit of a sampling across the board from, some of the ones that aren't necessarily the best velocity option all the way up to the best velocity option. So I've tested, I went ahead and tested Shooter's World Long Rifle and H4350, IMR 4451, Stay Ball 6.5, and Superformance. So it kind of gives you a good idea, not only some extruded powders, but some ball powders, how they're going to perform, or at least in my situation, how they performed. Again, the rifle that I'm using, it's a Remington 700 CDL Action, but I have converted it from, it was originally a 243 Winchester, took the barrel off, and I spun on, I had Matt over at Mr. Big Guns in Huntsville spin on a Christensen Arms Mesa 6.5 Creedmoor barrel. Everything headspaced properly, and it's been a good shooter so far. So I think we have a pretty good platform to test this bullet and powder combination in. The brass that I was using, it's gonna be hard to see, Lapua small primer brass. This is also the undersized flash hole version that they sell, so just be on the lookout if you do pick up some of this stuff. Just be mindful of that on your decapping pin. Generally, the decapping pins that are supplied with virtually every resizing die, almost every single one of them, are going to be too large for this flash hole, so you just got to be careful about that. Yeah, so there are the 5 powders. That's the brass I use. Oh, I'm using CCI 450 primers, small rifle Magnum primers. I've been using those almost since day one of loading the 6.5 Creedmoor. I've loaded it a lot. It's probably the cartridge I've shot the most, reloaded for the most out of anything else, and I have used almost exclusively CCI 450 since day one. Here and there I'll use something different depending on what type of brass it is, if it's a large primer brass or whatever. So yeah, all 50 rounds loaded to 2.810, and I was doing a 10 shot string with each powder. And what I tried to do was basically, I went all the way up to the max charge of each powder, okay? So like Superformance, it's not really coming through great. Print quality on these pages are pretty bad, but that's 46.8 grains is the max charge of Superformance. So I went up to 46.8, and then I backed off in half grain increments from there. So you can kind of run the numbers and you know, we'll see them here in a second, but 46.8 on Superformance. And then Stay-Ball 6.5 was 44 grains, IMR 44.51. That one actually went over. The max is 41.9, but the way I wanted to do my jumps, but you know, between each charge weight, I really wanted, I basically landed at 42 grains, so I'm only a tenth over. That way I could just kind of squeeze in the window of the charge weight range. And that's the thing too, some of these like Shooter's World long rifle, the max charge is 39.3 and the minimum charge is 36.2. So I had to modify a couple of these just to try to, you know, basically, I wasn't wanting to jump, you know, 0.2 of a grain, that type of stuff. I was kind of wanting to make some larger jumps to really try and cover pretty much the entire range that Hornady provides. That was really my goal, was to end up at the max, but I really was trying to start, you know, pretty close to the minimum charge, if at all possible, and make incremental jumps up to that max charge just to kind of see what the velocities look like along the way. So that was what I did. Now let's get to, oh, and all these velocities are taken with the Garmin chronograph. So the Garmin Zero chronograph. Look at this. Boy, isn't that busy. I know, I told you the formatting was garbage. Like when I look at it in Excel and on a Word doc and everything, it looks perfectly fine. But for some reason, when I go to print it off on my phone, because that's the only thing I have that's connected to a printer, whenever I try to do it, the formatting gets all jacked up. But essentially what you're looking at here is we've got the Hornady CX bullet, cartridge overall length, Lapua once fired brass, CCI 450 small rifle mag primers. Now here are the powders: H4350, IMR 4451, Shooter's World long rifle, Stay-Ball 6.5, and Superformance. Now this number here is the expected velocity, or it's the velocity listed in the manual, right, with the max charge of that particular powder, right? So 2850 with the max charge of 4350. That's H4350. So that's what Hornady said was their max velocity, okay? IMR 4451, max velocity was 2800. Shooter's World long rifle was 2750. Stay-Ball 6.5, 2850, and Superformance was 2950. So overall, I was pretty pleased with the velocity. So here's the charge weight, right? It's, you know, going from smallest to largest. So H4350, I started at 37.5 and went up to 42. Here's the associated velocities with each charge weight. Now again, it's only one shot per charge weight, so you know, you kind of take that with a grain of salt. IMR 4451 started at 38.4. This is one where I kind of had to tweak it a little bit. I jumped 0.4 of a grain instead of 0.5, and then instead of a half grain, just to try to make it work out to where I could go from the minimum up to the maximum. That's the one where I went over by 1/10, but jumping 0.4, that allowed me to finish right at 42 grains. Shooter's World long rifle, I had to drop it down even more. I had to go 0.3 of a grain, just to try to fit within that window from min to max. And then let's see, Stay-Ball 6.5, I was able to jump the half grain, and Superformance I could jump half grain as well. So just had to tweak a couple on the charge weights, but yeah, so there you go. You guys can pause the video or whatever you want to do to just kind of evaluate this better, I guess. Evaluate it for yourself. But in general, I would say just kind of across the board, we ended up doing pretty well velocity-wise. Now, we were a little bit below what Hornady said we would get with like H4350. You can see we're about 80 feet per second below what Hornady said we would hit. And then IMR 4451, we're about 30 feet per second below. Shooter's World long rifle, we're basically right at it. They said 2750 with the max. We're basically right there at 2750. 39 grains, we had 2757, and then 39.3, 2748. So we're basically right at what they said we would get with that. And then with Stay Ball 6.5, we were lagging just a little bit, not much, you know, basically 22 grains, 21.3 grains of, or not 21.3 grains, 21.3 feet per second, excuse me, shy of what they said we should be expecting. And then for Super Performance, we were actually over quite a bit. We were over 39 feet per second. So we almost hit 3,000 feet per second with that top charge of Super Performance. So yeah, there you go. Just in general, across the board, I was pretty pleased. I was really interested in Stay Ball 6.5 and Super Performance, just from the standpoint of I've loaded Super Performance before in the past in 6.5 Creedmoor, specifically with 140 grain bullets, and I've never been able to achieve the velocities that are listed in the manual, or really even come close to their high-end velocity, their top-end velocity that they show in the manual. I've never really been able to achieve that. That's across multiple rifles chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. So it's not just one particular instance where that's occurred. So I was very pleased to see the level of velocity that we got with Super Performance. I've got a ton of that powder, so that's why I was really glad to see that. I plan on probably loading with, I'll probably do my initial test with Super Performance, and I'll probably throw in Shooter's World long rifle. I may just, even though it's a little bit on the slower side, I would like to try it out because I've got a pound of it and I've never really loaded it in anything else. And so this will be a good test just to see how it shoots accuracy wise. It might shoot lights out, right? It might be just incredibly good in terms of the precision that we can get. And if that's the case, then, you know, giving up a little bit of velocity is not a bad thing, especially with the fact that I'm not really going to be shooting long range. I'm not going to be hunting at extended ranges or anything like that. It's going to be probably 200, 250 yards and in. So all of these powders would do just fine, right? As long as we can get really good performance out of them on the accuracy side of the house and get a good repeatable load worked up, they'll be fine. I could hit the woods with any of them. So it would just be interesting to see what type of accuracy we might see. If we could get almost 3,000 feet per second out of it, that's moving on pretty good. So that's really good stuff out of the 6.5 Creedmoor. So, and I think it's a 22-inch barrel. I'll have to go back and double check. It might be a 24. It might be a 24. I need to go look at the Christensen Arms website. It's the Mesa barrel is what it is. I bought it from a different website, from JA Outdoors. They were selling them basically I don't know if it's a pull-off barrel, but it's brand new from Christensen Arms, and then they just turn around and sell them. So that's what I ended up picking up. So I need to go double check the length on it. It might be 24, but really good stuff. Really pleased with the velocity results. Hopefully this can provide some level of information, you know, and maybe it's worth your time. But if you have any of these powders and you've tried the 130 grain Hornady CX bullet in your 6.5 Creedmoor, I'd love to hear about your experience, what you're seeing, you know, what the rifle is, what the velocities you're getting with it, if you're using any of these powders, or if you've used a different powder on their list. I've actually got a couple more of these. Let me see. Like Hybrid 100V, I've got Accurate 2700, I've got Winchester 760, Ramshot Big Game. So I've got a few other powders that I could actually test, and I mean I've got Varget as well. We could just about hit their entire list of powders just to test velocity, you know, initially, and then go from there and see what kind of accuracy we can get. So, but I'm interested in hearing what you guys have to say about it. Really good velocity performance. I'm pumped about that. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll catch you next time. Y'all have a good one.